All right, I think we're gonna start. Holy shit! Wow, if someone can control the levels, I'm gonna be really loud, so it'd be super cool to tone this down a notch. It's a dial on the back. Excellent, all right. So my name is Bruce Potter. I'm gonna talk about surviving a security startup. I guess the question is, how many of you here are in a startup right now? How many of you are thinking about starting a startup? How many of you are thinking about starting a startup but don't want to raise your hands because your coworkers are here? Okay, all right, cool. All right, just double checking. So I start all my talks with the same basic premise, is that you shouldn't, I know it's boring. I have a proper heckling front row today. Don't believe anything I say. I would encourage you not to believe anything you hear at this conference or any other conference. I'm a college dropout. I went to school at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and where's that? You must have gone to UAF too, because we struggled a lot with geography. It's a tough industry right now because there's a whole bunch of people who are entering it now who have gone through formal programs in computer science, computer security, network security, information assurance, whatever you want to call it. When I was going through school, there was nothing like that, right? There may have been a few master's programs running around, but nothing that was actually real and that undergrads could wrap their head around. So what I learned, and a lot of people in my generation learned, was on the job, right? It was really, we cared about it, we wanted to learn, we spent a lot of our own time and energy and money. You know, when we were sitting around up in Anchorage and trying to figure out what to do with our spare time, you know, my wife Heidi and Shmoo and some other people were trying to figure out, you know, how to start a hacker collective, a la the Loft or something like that. And we ended up starting the Shmoo group, and that was effectively our outlet. That's how we learned, was banding together to do whatever random projects we could think of. You know, if it was write crappy code or do some articles or go to conferences and get up on stage and say a bunch of random shit, that's what we did. And it was great and educational, but we just learned kind of on the fly, and no one told us whether we were right, whether they were wrong, how to help us improve. We had to figure that all on our own. We're at a point now where we have formal structured curriculum, but we're in a world in which the industry moves very, very, very quickly, right? Everything changes every day, which is the opposite of what happens in, say, mechanical engineering or, you know, a lot of other engineering and hard sciences, where the coefficients of static friction of sandpaper haven't changed as long as we made sandpaper, right? Like the force of gravity has been the same as long as we've been alive and on this earth, but how we defend networks and how we attack them changes every day. So I am no more an expert at this than anybody else here is. I would encourage you, if you disagree with anything I say, please challenge me on it, hold me accountable. And I think there's a trend right now to not holding others accountable as well. Like, it's one thing for me to stand here and say, challenge me. I think you should challenge everybody around you as well. The industry is big and getting very unwieldy and full of money and sellouts. Thank you. See, that's is that my id or my super ego? I get confused as to his role in my life. Anyway, thank you. So I've been through a few startups. What I'm going to talk about today is really my own personal observations. I'm not a business major. I haven't studied a lot of business. I've been around a lot of failure and a little bit of success. And I would encourage you to learn from my failures and at least take my success with a grain of salt and figure out what's right for you to do. I co-founded a company called Ponta Technologies 8 years ago and was the CTO there, and we recently sold to the KeyW Corporation, which is a mid-sized defense kind of sort of contractor in Central Maryland, where I got kind of mouthy and they promoted me to CTO. So instead of kicking back and relaxing, I took a promotion and now have more responsibility. So, and to be clear, I'm not a lawyer. Nothing today should be construed as legal advice, even though I'm going to say it kind of authoritatively. When I do a lot of my work, when I'm trying to kind of conceptualize things or wrap my head around what it means to do whatever, be it cybersecurity maturity models, or whether it be some sort of risk management thing, or breaking into this box or whatever, I use Google, but oftentimes I use Google Images because I find that's a much faster way of finding out useful information than rolling through Google results. You'd be shocked if you just use Google Images instead of Google, how productive you could be. So I Googled startup, and I get a whole bunch of graphics that frankly made me want to fucking barf, right? Like, it's this grand, like, oh, everything's fine, and it's set up like on a soundstage, and everyone looks pretty and happy and isn't trying to kill each other and wondering what's going to happen next and where my paycheck's coming from. No, it's, you know, plants growing and signage and all kinds of bullshit, and that's not the way it all goes. Every startup is different, right? Security startups are their own breed of different, but you know, every startup is different. There's been lots of books written on the topic. I think there are some decent books that are out there. Lean Startup from Eric Ries, 0 to 1, which is a little too platitudey for me, but it gets you thinking. There's a whole bunch of crappy books out there. At the end of the day, most of them amount to the motivational phrases you see on Facebook every day. There's just a lot of like common sense and a lot of platitudes. And as much as I would normally kind of slag that, as it turns out, running a company is a complicated thing. Thanks. I'm an old man, and I don't know what's happening. No. So, years ago, Virus isn't here, is he? Trust me, the peer pressure will not work. So, I was at DEF CON, and we were doing the closing for Hack Fortress, and I got up on stage and was announcing like who had won and all this kind of stuff. And we were at the Riviera, and I had thanked the Alexis Park staff, which is where the DEF CON had been in years prior. And everyone's like, we're at the Riv, drink, and like, screw you, I'm not drinking, I got nothing to drink. And so I kept going. And so Virus, DC 949 guy, comes up and he puts a handle of something on the counter in front of me. I'm like, all right, I guess I'll drink this. So mid-sentence, I grab the handle and I tip it back and go to take a big swig because I'm a big man and I could drink my alcohol. And when it got here and I read Everclear upside down, I knew I was in a world of hurt. And my face went red, I went flush, my heart rate spiked. I said probably 3 more sentences, and I just pointed, said, they won, and I left the stage. So I assure you that warm Smirnoff Ice is not going to intimidate me at all. And it's really warm. Like, the one thing I want to try to touch on today are the specifics around what make a security startup different, because there are idiosyncrasies about our industry that I think are important to realize. There are lots of resources out there on how to start companies, how to run them, how to build your teams, how to go rah-rah, whatever. That's not what I'm going to try to cover. There will be some general stuff in here, mostly is observational for me, but I'm going to try to focus on some of the specific security stuff. First of all, you should make yourself a company, like today. Right? It's really easy. Go to company.com, you say, I want to be an LLC, you give them a credit card, and in some states it's online and automatic, and you are a functional legal entity within about 15 minutes. In other states, they have to go physically, someone has to courier it to the state courthouse to file it, and you pay an extra fee for some person that actually will take a piece of physical paper to the courthouse or to the state building and file it on your behalf. Some states don't allow a single entity LLC, so you can be a sole proprietorship, but LLCs have 0 overhead associated with them. There's no yearly meetings, there's no real bylaws. Company.com will give you like a set of bylaws you just sign that's basically like, I'm going to do stuff for money, and you sign it and you're done. There's really no compelling reason when you start to be an S Corp or a C Corp. I've been in companies that down the road needed to be an S or C Corp at some point, and it turns out you can create the second corporation and sell all the assets to the second corporation, and it's fine. Some lawyers get some money in the process, and beyond that, it works out okay. So get yourself an LLC, and in your early stages, this is great because if it's just you, you have the flexibility to engage as an LLC and as an individual under 1099. Right, so 1099 is just a tax form, so people often refer to 1099ing it as being an independent contractor. If you're going to do work for a company, sometimes they want to engage you as a company, like as an organization, and sometimes it's easier for them to engage you as a person, right? If they're like a subcontractor under an existing contract already, it's very hard to get to a sub situation. So it's much easier for them to bring you on as an independent contractor. So in your early days, even when I started Ponatech, I had a co-founder with me, and he would 1099 into a client, and I would go into a different client, the LLC, and then we just had an agreement that said any money that he made on the 1099 would go against the profits he would pull from the company that we had as an LLC, and we just kept track of how much he made on the 1099, and we reconciled it. There's nothing that says when you go into it with somebody else that they always get 50%. You can come up with any kind of ratio or agreement that you want, and it works out fine. So after you start the company, you should consider what you want to do. There's a lot of reasons people want to start a company. Sometimes you got like a vision, you got something, an itch you want to scratch, I got this idea for this thing that I think I can make some money. Some people just want to make themselves a home, something they can do that's for themselves for the foreseeable future. Some people want to build something, get rich and sell it. There's all kinds of different reasons why you would start a company, but I would encourage you to think long and hard about why you're trying to do it. And it's easy to articulate at the bar like, man, I got this great idea. But at the end of the day, you need to be prepared to dedicate yourself to this thing. And when it goes sideways, be prepared to get out, right? Have a backup plan. No matter what you do, be ready for it not to work out and to GTFO, because things can go totally sideways. There were certainly times in Ponatech where I had my resume ready. And there was one time where we had one client who vaporized in the middle of the task, right? We had all our people on it, which was 2 others besides me. And halfway through, I went out to California to visit them, and I pulled up at their office building. And it's 10 o'clock in the morning on like a Tuesday, and I get people in California go to work kind of late, but there were 2 cars in the parking lot. I'm like, I know this song. I walk up, I knock on the door, because the door is not unlocked. There's nobody there, there's no receptionist, nothing. And the CTO, who is my client, comes up to the door after a few minutes and says, hey, what's up? I'm like, did you close down? He's like, oh yeah, we ran out of money. Like, am I gonna get paid? They're like, no, the banks all get the money. You don't get anything. And so I was like, oh, this was it. This is what we were doing, and we don't have a lot of money in the bank. So I called the other guys I'm with. I'm like, I would encourage you to get your resumes ready and start talking to people. And we managed to pull through it, but it was a pain in the ass. Ask yourself what your market needs. So this is where a lot of the startup books like Lean Startup and things like that focus on, is figuring out what does your market need and how are you going to fulfill it. This is a very complex problem, but there's a few things that I've taken away from my years that I think it's worth keeping in mind. One, just because you really want to build a thing doesn't mean that anyone wants that thing. Like, I've seen plenty of people with a vision like, hey, there's this awesome idea that I have, and it's awesome to you, and it's awesome to nobody else. Particularly, it's not awesome to people that have the money, right? Like, it's one thing that other people will think it's awesome because you went to a conference and presented it and it sounded great, but when push comes to shove, your execution or the thing that you built is just not attractive from a sales perspective. So I find in those cases it's people who are too familiar with their market. They're way down in the trenches and they see a need in the trench, where they can't really build an abstraction that ends up being attractive to people. I've also seen a lot of situations where people are like, we're going to be the first to market. This is a new market. And that's like super dangerous, right? There are a lot of companies that were the first to market and the market never materialized. And they torched a ton of cash doing it. So one of the companies I used to work for was called Fort Knox, spelled N-O-C-S, not K-N-O-X. That is literally how you had to answer the phone. And Fort Knox, we tried to build a payment processing network, a nationwide credit card processing network in the late 90s. It sounds like probably a good business model, except for the fact that we were pushing SET, the Secure Electronic Transactions, which was the Visa MasterCard smart card-based payment processing system. So imagine, if you will, having the forward thought to think, we should have smart card-based credit cards in order to prevent fraud in 1998. That would have been cool. Like, in hindsight, people are like, oh, I would have given you money for that. Well, at the time, no one gave us money for that. So we took the founders' money and a bunch of VC money. We built a nationwide network. We were the only people on the planet with a functional SET infrastructure. From start to finish, we could process the whole thing. There were no customers. This was a brand new market. We were at the pointy end of the spear, and it turns out we were only 15 years too early for it. So in geologic time, we were close. in internet time, we were fairly far away. So beware entering new markets, but on the flip side, beware entering them too late, right? Because when you enter them too late, then you have to play games with pricing and shit like that. It's better to be like number 2. Number 1 kind of sucks and is dangerous. Number 3 and 4 have to run too fast for their own good. Number 2 is a good place to be. While you're trying to figure out what the market needs, Gartner, Forrester, other analyst reports, super useful and super expensive. Most of you probably don't have your own personal Gartner accounts. I'd probably put money on that. I would encourage you. I have seen people who know other people with Gartner access being like, hey man, can you pull all the reports about like everything security oriented? Like, that's asking a lot. That's being a pretty big leech, right? Like, you know, hey man, if I buy you a case of beer, can you pull this one report for me? That's a little bit more polite. Like, and just to be clear, I've seen people ask like for leeches on Gartner and Forrester reports, and just honestly, they're expensive things. Be nice, be polite. Your friends will help you out with it, but you know, within reason. The last bullet that I have here, I think, is an important one. People like to have plans, right? Investors like to see business plans, and people get trepidatious if they don't have a plan going forward. And you know, got to have, this is what I'm going to do in 3 months, in 6 months, in a year, in 18 months. And this industry changes really fast, and what you think you're going to do in 18 months is probably not what you're going to be doing. Right? So you need to have enough of a plan to understand the basic vector that you're on, but you need to not be attached to it enough that at some point you decide, well, that was stupid, and you go off and do something else, right? You got to be prepared. You know, it's like being a spy, right? Just to drop the plan and be like, just keep on cruising. Like, I'm gonna go do something else in my life now. I tend to be on the side of not planning enough. Oh, is he falling asleep? My 4-year-old's falling asleep, so I know I'm really dropping it on this one. This is really. We'll call this a shitty talk. Oh, well, I got a thumbs up from him for that.